90s baseball cards, Randy Johnson, and a bunch of other stuff. But I'm joined by Michael. He goes by Roundtree13 cards on Instagram. Michael, welcome, man. How are you?
Oh, great, Brett. Appreciate you having me.
What I mean, I was trying to think of this because I was like going back and forth on some notes, and I was like, let's try to make this a little bit different. I know there's some crossover listeners, but I felt like it is unique, I think, to me in the hobby, and maybe not to you because it's kind of the space you live in, but I feel like just being a Randy Johnson collector, there's not a ton of Randy Johnson collectors that flood my feed. And I know you're not necessarily a fan of any of the teams Johnson played on, but I'd love to maybe start there with just the big unit. Like, why him? Why'd you start collecting him? And maybe just share some of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm a pretty big Texas Rangers fan. But like I think when you grow up in the '90s and you follow a team, they kind of have an identity. And the Rangers were always like more of an offensive team. And I grew up playing baseball, and I was a pitcher, and so you have like an appreciation for your own position that you played. The I've always had an appreciation for those competitors. Those people that seem like relentless for pursuit of just winning. You think about Tom Brady. I think Mahomes has that. Randy Johnson was that guy pitching. Clemens had that too, but his brand just really went downhill, and he went to the Yankees, and I just don't like that favorite team. That team that just always wins, or kind of. And no offense to any Yankees fans out there, I think it's an amazing franchise, but it's an appreciation for the position. I didn't start there either. I grew up, and my older brother, he collected basketball, so I collected basketball. So it was first off, it was Kobe, it was Duncan. When I got back into the hobby, I focused on Kobe, Duncan, picked up a few Brady rookies, but then you're like, man, all my money's gone. So it's like, you know, so you kind of start to figure out, where you have the most fun. And for me, it was like you start to learn about some of these 90 parallels, and how great they are, and you realize that this guy was so dominant during that time period. um, I mean, his stats alone are just amazing. The run he had with Cy Young, strikeouts, wins over 30 years old. I mean, it just is. It's just an amazing person. And then you start to look at, okay, is the person is he a good guy? And everything I can tell, like, he seems to be a really good guy. And as a photographer, I follow him on Instagram. You know, they just kind of, it all adds to a certain area. There's all these things that come together that make the person that you collect special. So
I think one of the topics that we're going to, well, I don't think, I know one of the topics we're going to dig into is just like the kind of this rise of 90s baseball parallels and just the demand for them. Um, but I feel like Randy Johnson is a good backdrop for that topic. I'd love to know, just as you evolved into that mode where you're like, all right, Randy Johnson, I'm having the most fun here. I can probably buy more of his cards than I can Kobe. I'm enjoying collecting them. How did you go about organizing kind of your list around, here are the key Randy Johnson cards that I want to go after? Maybe since he did have a big career and there are a lot of cards, like, how did you maybe shrink the C and kind of focus in on a key target list?
I think it takes time. You have to put in your time. Like, I think you go back to first, like, what did you collect when you were in the '90s? So you start to explore that. That space. And for me, I didn't know about some of the rare parallels during that time period. I mean, eBay came on really late. We had Beckett magazines, and it was all about base cards even then. And so, I mean, in the '90s, I remember when SP Authentic came out, and in basketball, and how the Vince Carter was numbered to 3,500, but it seemed unobtainable. Like, people would chase that card. It would go up every month in the Beckett, and it was like, oh my gosh, this card's serial numbered. And so I think you have to start with what you know, and then you start to follow different people. You start to buy cards, and the excitement for a card coming, does it does it hold a week later?
Mm.
And then if it does, then you're like, oh man, this is awesome. And you start to explore that even more by other pictures, by other people from that parallel. So, but I think it comes with time, and it's like trial and error. I mean, you have to put in your time to really figure out what you like. I think a lot of people end up in the same like 5 to 10 cards naturally, like these sets, these parallels, which is really interesting. And then there's like this debate on which one is the best, and I think that's fun too.
So I think you got in your episode, you got into it a little bit with the precious metal gents guys, but maybe help us understand, especially I know there's some crossover with other sports on what are the key cards or the key parallels, but if you look at a player like Johnson, what are maybe those like when you kind of close your eyes and you think of his key cards, 90s parallels, like what are the kind of some of the first cards that come to your mind?
I think I think initially when I got into it, I was all about the Fleer Ultra Platinum Medallion, especially the first year, and then you kind of realize that the second year is just amazing. Just the photos, like the this card right here. Yeah, I mean this is a PSA 5, and I've never thought once about selling it. I bought it raw. And I have a PSA 9 of it too as well. But like this was the first big card I bought raw, graded it. Have no idea why it's 5, by the way. But like that is a great entry card, I think, into any player's market, unless you're going for Jeter or Griffey, and then it's still expensive, or Bonds. But I think that's what I think about is like ultra. And then I feel like Skybox just has become this thing. Like, it's amazing how the PMG market's taken off, the essential credentials market, all of that is taken off. But when I think about 90s, I think about that card. I think it may be the photos from that year. They're just really awesome.
I love the platinum medallion entry point. Do you feel with like collecting a player like Randy Johnson, you have amassed as through your journey, you've amassed a bunch of different cards, and then you've sold some of those cards to move kind of up the ladder on some of his bigger cards, or have you just kind of kept everything as you've been collecting him?
No, I'm not the I need every Randy Johnson card type of collector, and I think those are phenomenal. Like the people that can do that. I buy cards, and then I'm like trying to create this like top 40, top 50 type feel to my collection. And I could totally ship in like 6 months, and I could be like top 20. I mean, it's just like it changes, but that's where I'm kind of at right now. So I'm looking at some of my cards. I'm thinking, okay, these are amazing, but are they in that top 40, top 50? And if not, then I try to move it on. And then it's fun to buy cards. I mean, it's fun I have a mail day today. I can't wait. Like, honestly, I was hoping it would come yesterday so I could open it on here, but pretty excited about it. And I mean, that's what a lot of it's about, is like the hunt, out for delivery. And you're like, man, I hope they put it in my mailbox,
So this episode, we've got some time before this will go live. It'll be like a week or so. So maybe I'm sure you'll have gotten the card and you'll have posted it. So maybe share, what is this mail day and why are you so excited about it?
All right, so it's a 97 finest gold embossed refractor of Randy Johnson, and it's one of those cards that I have not seen. And I think the last public sale was like 2020, if Card Ladder is accurate. I'm sure there may be private sales, but it's not numbered. I think if it was numbered, it would be one of those top 10 cards considered. And maybe it is, I don't know, but I haven't seen it. And one of the Randy Johnson collectors that I talked to, he's like, hey, I'm going to move some of my cards. I'm going to reach out to you and another Randy Johnson collector first. And I'm like, I want this. And at that point, you're like, I don't care, what the price is. I mean, you care, but in the back of your mind, like, don't want this to hit auction. So you're like, what's the price? And he said it, and then you're like, yes. But then in the back of your mind, I gotta sell some stuff, So that's kind of where I've been with this one, and I'm just excited to get it. It's coming from a collection, it's going into my collection. I think it immediately goes into my top 10 cards of Randy Johnson. So pretty excited about it.
So I love this topic, and I want to maybe dig in just regarding like getting the proverbial at bat when a collector comes to you, because this collector knows that you are a Randy Johnson collector. You post your cards. You've built this brand with your account that, people turn to and they say, "Oh, instead of this just being, auctioned and then picked up and gone in the flipper vortex, like
Yeah.
as a seller, I'd rather just that card end up in a collection of someone who's going to appreciate it." So when you're in these moments where someone gives you this opportunity and it's a key card, like how do you go about making the deal happen? Like, are you mindful of like, I don't want to like try to over negotiate my position because I am like getting afforded this opportunity? Is there some negotiation? Like, talk a little bit about how you handle those scenarios.
Well, I'm probably not the best negotiator out there. Sorry. If I like a card, then I'll look at comps, but I think for certain cards, you just got to put that aside and say, okay, I haven't seen this before. Let me go ahead and buy this because I may not have another opportunity. And I think it depends on your relationship with the person. I mean, most people are going to give you a pretty fair offer if they're reaching out to you in this type of example. So it may be a few $100 over for cards like this. I mean, you say yes, you appreciate it, and I think that even there's not a lot of back and forth, and like I had a price in mind for this card, and it came in like $250 over, and I was like, that's cool, let's do it, let's do it, and that I'm not made of money, but at the same time, I can look at 10 cards in my collection and think, okay, would I rather have this card or those 10 cards? Can I obtain these 10 cards again? If so, let me sell these cards. I've appreciated them. Let me move to this one.
One thing I've picked up on just from following 90s baseball collectors in this example here is that the scarcity of specific cards definitely like plays a role in people's interest for those cards, where that Johnson card that you're waiting for might not be as big of a card for another collector, but it is for you because maybe it's been on your list and you're looking for it. How, like, maybe talk a little bit about that, because I know that there's, I was talking with Cardi C, and his primary card was a Nomar Garciaparra 24 karat gold, and he hasn't seen it ever publicly sell. So how big of a role in like your collection does like landing a card that's rare and scarce like fit in? How do you kind of think about that as you're building out your collection?
I think that's part of what you learn along the way is why do people hold certain cards? Why do they hold them? And I think that makes them more attractive. And then I think as you acquire them and people reach out to you, it's natural to think to covet that card more and to not want to give it up. So there are some cards people will not sell. I mean, they're like taking them to the grave. And I think 24 carats a good one. PMGs from 98 in baseball, they're beautiful and they're numbered to 50. And I cannot find a Randy Johnson there. And I know one's going to pop up right when I'm broke, so it's like, yeah, but now we have a solution for that, we got
Yes.
So and that's gonna probably spark the market, just that ability to consolidate easily and have time. I could see that being a big engine for some of these rare and scarce cards that's coming. So, but people hold on to things that they love and they like, and I think that there's a lot of cards from that time period that are just beautiful cards. They're like works of art. First time they've had them, and you start to, if you can acquire your card and you have this sense that I want other people from this set, then you have something, I think.
How often do you do that as a baseball card collector, where you like start with your like, I'm gonna get this Randy Johnson parallel, and wow, it's gorgeous, wow, it's beautiful, and instead of just like waiting and moving on to your next Randy Johnson, you decide, well, I love this card and there are other players I have affinity for that are in this set. I'm going to go move over and try to pick up some of those cards. Is that something that happens regularly, or is that maybe something that maybe doesn't happen too often with you and your collecting.
Oh, it happens. I've got so many saved searches on eBay. It's like 99 rubies. I'll buy any picture from that. 98 PMG. If I have the money, I'll buy any picture from that time period or try to. Flare Showcase 97 row 0. That's an amazing set. It's affordable right now. Like I think like here's the Mariano.
Oh,
From they're just beautiful.
dude, the shimmer effect on those cards is incredible.
Yeah, I think even though there's a lot of different legacy cards from each year, row 0 through 3 in some cases, like that one's really cool. Platinum 98 is amazing. 24 karat. I started to go on like a Fleur Brilliance 24 karat kick, just kind of like adding some players from that, and that's been really fun. So I think that happens a lot, and I think that's a good indication that you're probably never going to sell that your player PC from that set. Is like, do you want other players from that?
I think when people talk about 90s cards a lot, baseball cards, you hear, Griffey, Jeter, Bonds, and you don't really there's not a ton around pitchers, but like when I close my eyes and think about 90s baseball, I think about the Randy Johnsons, the Greg Maddux, all those guys. What is it to you that you're attracted to the pitchers? Is it because there just seems like it seems like an area where there's not as much interest as some of these others, and you really like the pitchers, so you're collecting them, or something different?
So, well, yeah, I talked about like my love for baseball, and like I was a pitcher, and but also there's like certain moments that you go back to. And I remember Arizona versus the Yankees. That series went 7 games. I remember the crappy apartment I was in at the time, and like Luis Gonzalez, that bloop single over shortstop to win it in Game 7. But I mean, it was Schilling and Johnson that carried that team. And if you look back in like the history of playoff baseball, you see pitchers like elevate. And I think that's amazing that they can take over a series. Madison Bumgarner for the Giants, I witnessed that firsthand, although it was Lincecum in 2010 that beat the Rangers, really, or Ron Washington. That's a totally different topic. But then you think about these pitchers and like the impact they play throughout their regular season, how their numbers aren't really like sexy and everything. You get to the postseason, you got a pitcher that's going to do 3 starts in the World Series or a 7-game series. You got a legit shot. I mean, it's amazing what they can do. So
is that just like a hobby narrative that needs like some myth busting of like, don't collect pitchers because they don't hold any value, or is that just kind of generic? Because what you just positioned and you just sold me on, like, yeah, pitchers are not, they're very important and they're critical in order to win a World Series.
Brett, I'll have you collecting left tackles by the end of it. So, yeah, I think pitchers are underrated, but then again, I mean, I collect them, so it's like, yeah, you're probably not going to get a fair answer from me on that. But catchers are underrated too. I mean, there are so many positions that matter. I think that the home run is sexy, right? Everybody wants the home runs, and I think that's awesome. I mean, I went to the home run derby here in Arlington, saw that national anthem. It wasn't that bad. No, I'm just joking. But the home run is awesome. It's fun. I get why people collect Bonds and Griffey, Aaron Judge. I mean, but if you go back and watch a pitcher that is truly on that game, and you just watch how like desperate and just a batter is. I sent you that Kerry Wood video from 1998. Yes. You got to post that video. For anybody who wants an appreciation of how a pitcher can take over a game, watch Kerry Wood's 1998 game versus the Astros. Amazing 47-minute documentary on YouTube. It will get you collecting Kerry Wood. So
the crowd reaction while that's all unfolding is just pandemonium. And that was like, I don't know. I think about this a lot with cards and collecting, and a figure like Kerry Wood. Is Kerry Wood the greatest pitcher of all time? Absolutely not. But like in those moments where Kerry Wood was Kerry Wood, like his stock was so high that like the byproduct of it today is just like so much nostalgia. So I think like when people see maybe sales of rare and scarce Kerry Woods cards who didn't grow up during that moment, might be like, who's this Kerry Wood guy? But back to that like doc, it's like all you have to do is watch the doc and understand like how passionate Cubs fans are and all
Yeah.
of that. So I that part of like collecting really fascinates me when a player's legend can kind of carry his cards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's special, and it can happen in the playoffs. It can happen in a regular season game. You just never know. I mean, perfect game, no hitter. Good, modest card collection. I think you've had him on before, but
Danny, yep.
he's got this 1999 Ultra Platinum masterpiece of David Wells where they're carrying him off the field. If you're like, okay, what's a great example of like how to collect? Like read his story on that about him going to that game and like capturing that card. That card's never leaving that guy's play. You know, it's an amazing card, and it's probably not like a LeBron exquisite RPA price. It was probably expensive, but it was, it was a moment that he remembers. I think that's really cool.
I love that. Before we move off, we've kind of gone a couple different directions. Maybe hit one more Randy topic before we move over to just the 90s baseball card market. Talk about your favorite Randy Johnson card in your collection and why it's your favorite card.
My favorite card is and I'm not trying to pump like this card, but like it's the Randy Johnson, it's and here's why. Like I collected with my brother in the 90s, and he was always Tim Duncan, and he has the Tim Duncan 24 karat 24 of 24, and this is the Randy Johnson 24 karat 24 of 24. So it's like that's our bond. We have both those of our PC, of our player. It was very lucky, but I acquired it from Zan, and I gave up a 98 Pedro PMG, and it was a couple other layers to the trade too as well. But how you got it from another collector. I've always wanted the gold out of 99. I couldn't even find that, and then to have this, it's just very special. And I think it is one of those top 5 sets to me that you buy a card and you want more copies of other players. So it kind of checks all the boxes.
How long have you owned that card?
Man, I think Zan, he got it earlier this year, and so 5-6 months. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's one that's not going anywhere. Have you seen another one pop up since you've bought it or traded for it?
No, but I had the only PSA copy for like 2 seconds, and then big unit cards. He actually graded his, and it got an 8. So mine's a 6. I love it. I don't care. But at the same time, I'm like, man, you couldn't even let me have the throne for like a day. Like you had to go grade yours. So I know where only 2 copies are.
Okay, I mean, 24 copies of a card with those. I think about the Manning 24 karat gold, and I just think of my Manning group chat, and I know where a few of them are, but I'm always just like, where are the other ones at? So the 24 seems a lot today, but in 90s cards, I feel like it's hardly anything, and those cards are impossible to track down, especially of your key guys.
Yeah.
So I want to hit just the what's happening with 90s baseball cards and rare and scarce parallels. You obviously, it's a space you collect in, spend a lot of time. Can you maybe help us understand, like, there appears to be a ton of interest. I look at Crusade prices. I look at the 98 PMGs, 24 carats, golds, more. Like, it just seems like these cards are going nuts. But I don't remember like this happening at this level a year, 2 years ago. Now, granted, I might not have been paying as close of attention to it, but maybe share some perspective on, like, from your seat, what's happening with 90s parallels right now, and maybe what are the reasons why you think some of these cards are elevating in value?
Well, I mean, we're all in our 40s now, so we got some more money, and I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's the education piece as well. So you come back in and you go back to what you know. So you go buy your Bo Jackson card with the bat over and the shoulder pad. You go buy that stuff. You buy your Jeter 93 SP. You buy, cards that you remember, the 89 Griffey, which are amazing cards. But then, like, I think it's through education and just seeing other collectors and kind of how they're navigating. Maybe they've been in that space a little bit longer. You start to develop an appreciation for how hard it is to find some of these cards, and when you get them, what it takes. And a lot of times these cards just don't pop up on eBay. It's the back channels, and so that is what I think has come about. It's like when these cards do come to auction and they haven't sold in maybe a year or 2 years, and someone knows like this is my chance. Why wait? Why wait 5 more years, 10 more years for it to come about again? I mean, there will be some more cards that come to market because of the price increase. I mean, that always happens, but there are so many of these cards that are just in binders and they're not going anywhere. And, that drives the price up. So.
It seems like whenever one of these cards comes up, whatever auction house it is where it does come to auction, it feels like there's just like rumblings from collectors, whether it's just people excited to see the result or people trying to figure out, okay,
yeah,
people trying to figure out how do I, acquire funds in the right time to get these. So when you see these rare and scarce cards like actually hit the auction block, is like, as someone who's probably in group chats communicating with a lot of different collectors, like, do you immediately know that like there's going to be a lot of interest for these cards just based on your channels of communication?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's people that will talk about it and there's people that'll be quiet and they're interested in it. I mean, I think if I have the card already, I'll watch it and I'm excited. I mean, I'll watch the last 10 seconds, the countdown, I think that's exciting. So, and more times than not, it's at where you paid or over nowadays. So, but I think there's a lot of discussion around some of these cards that hit the market. Yeah, people want them. And with Fund Your Cards and Wharf, now it's, you have liquidity with your own collection. I'll never forget watching YouTube videos in the pandemic and watching a Dallas card show and this young kid, we're all young. I don't know how I look young, but he goes, everything's so liquid right now. And that I always remember that moment because he was right. Everything you had could be sold. Everybody had cash. And I think when you have these avenues where you can want something and it's obtainable and all it takes is just sacrificing a part of your collection, that's going to drive some of the market. It has. So
For listeners who don't play in the space, maybe help us understand like the profile of like the 90s baseball card collector. And I know it's not like cookie cutter, one size fits all, but are most of the collectors you see like player collectors, team collectors, people just chasing everything? Like, how would you summarize like the typical 90s, rare and scarce collector?
I think there's phases that you go through more than anything to get to where you're at the moment. And that's going to change too as well. But you come in and you go back to what you know. So you have those people that are acquiring cards that they remember. And then you have people that start to learn about different sets. I'm watching somebody on Instagram right now start to collect Randy Johnson, and I'm like, ooh, I remember buying that card. I think that's an awesome card. I have that card, and like the joy they have in that mail day and getting it, I think that's awesome. And then but you can kind of see what's coming with some people. They're going to increase their education. They're going to get comfortable spending a little bit more money. They're going to hold cards, sell cards. They're going to start talking to you and learn about what you like. And I think that's a very underrated part of Instagram, is just not just liking someone's card, but saying, what do you think of this card? Mm-hmm. Or, how does this card fit into your collection? How would you rank this? Or, things like that, I think are very underrated. If you're looking to get into a player PC even deeper, because a lot of us, we will buy something and we want another copy, and we buy that second copy. So a lot of us have multiple copies of amazing cards. And I think it's through your networking and through those questions that someday I might need money or somebody might need money. And you, just like I got that message the other day, that's one avenue of how to acquire some cards. I'm totally getting off your question here. So I think there are phases. I think a lot of people will collect what they remember, and then they'll start to identify with a player or a team, or even a time period. And I think those are kind of your three avenues. It's like a player PC, a team, or you have an appreciation for a specific set, it seems.
So I want to hit on this path because you mentioned earlier the platinum medallion, and you mentioned this other Johnson collector, and you're watching them get these mail days, and you're like, I remember being in that phase. And it's not, the path isn't linear for everyone, but maybe to help us understand, like, for you, like, what is that, like, cards, product sets, like, what has that progression been? And I know there's a ton, but like talking through, like, okay, you started with platinum medallions and then you moved and now you're here. Like, what are some of those phases of, being a 90s collector with, the backdrop of Randy Johnson you've gone through?
I think, I started with platinum, then you go to like finest and refractors and tops chrome and refractors. And then you start to learn about sets that just weren't that, for me, they weren't that popular or available back in the 90s. And, Metal Universe, I ripped a few packs of that, but it wasn't like this amazing thing at the moment. Maybe that was because I was in my teens. I didn't know anything, but, I think you start to educate on, what is amazing and what's out there. And, through that, you start to have an appreciation for some of these cards. So I don't know. Am I answering that question right?
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm just curious, trying to get in your head space, what kind of the progression is. So as we're kind of rounding the corner here, I'm curious what in this, I guess, the perception of like 2024 90s baseball cards are taking off. Like, to me, that seems like it's a thing. Is that a real thing, like, to you as someone who's in it collecting it? And if so, like, maybe, like, what's the most surprising thing about this elevation of 90s baseball and like the collector conversation?
I think the most surprising thing to me has been how some people just don't have a price. Like, and it's not like I'm throwing all this money at it. I want to get value. I want to be fair, but there are a lot of people that they have a collection. They're content with that collection. They're not selling that collection. And I think that's why a lot of 90s cards have spiked, is because there's just not availability. I mean, there are cards to 50 that don't pop up that often. Now, that being said, you do see a lot more sales of like Griffey, Bonds, Jeter, because I think of the amount of money that is in those cards. But some of the, Tony Gwynn, Frank Thomas, Maddox, Pedro, Randy Johnson. I mean, these cards, these are stars. These are Hall of Famers, and there are a lot of people out there that are they're deep in their collection, and they're not going anywhere. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing to me, Brad, is like you have to talk to people, and they see that you have an appreciation for the player, the set, and that they don't want to sell you something that you're just going to throw on, PWCC, and make $50. Like, that's not what they want. I took $100 loss on a card just 2 days ago and offered it to a collector just so it wouldn't go to auction. Right? I didn't want it to, and it could have gone up. It could have set a new high. But for me, like, I wanted it to go to somebody I knew who needed that card, and I had 2 copies of it. Well, I'm buying cards right now, so it's like I think that's the surprising part, is like Card Ladder can capture public sales, but there are so many things going on, that are not public. Sorry, IRS, don't.
We won't tell anybody. So let's close it out here. you've shared a lot of awesome information and appreciate it. Maybe for anyone listening that has that, like, and I'll tell you, it's like I've made this comment to Zan before, and some of those guys, other 90s collectors. It's like, just like listening to content and being like, understand, like hearing players' names, going back and like digging in, like it's really, like, for me, it's really got me like interested. Now is that interest going to lead to me, starting a Movon PC? I don't know. Probably not, but it could. But I think like that's cool because now I'm thinking about like players from my past that resonate with me, and at one moment in time I had a binder full of their cards. So I think there's a lot of people in that position right now that are maybe haven't dipped their toe in 90s baseball, but maybe are considering and thinking about it. So maybe as we close this out, like what sort of recommendations would you have to anyone who's kind of considering or thinking about starting maybe a 90s baseball wing of their collection?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think knowledge is going to take time. That I've learned. So content is very helpful, and there's a lot of great content out there that talks about certain rarity and parallels and why cards are special. I think you have to dive into that head first. I think for me, if I could do it over again, I would think back to key moments that were impactful. And you think about the 2001 World Series. You think about that game that Kerry Wood pitched. You think about a home run that was hit. And a lot of these cards have amazing images, but they tell stories on the back if you read. And you can see they'll even reference some of these moments. So, I think about key moments or games that were impactful for you. I can tell you, right, Bills Chiefs, that playoff game, I think it was a divisional game. Man, I remember where I was at during that game. USC Texas Longhorns Rose Bowl 05. You remember where you were at. So it's like, think back to those moments that were special, and then think about a card that you can acquire that represents that.
I love it. That's such good advice. You can find him on Instagram, Roundtree 13 cards. If you have a 98 Randy Johnson PMG available, hit him up. Like, he's looking for one. This guy's got a ridiculous collection, right? Is that the number one card you're looking for right now, Michael?
It is. Come take advantage of me. Come, please. Come.
He laid all of his cards out. Easy, not gonna over negotiate, easy to do business with. So let's get that card in his collection. Dude, this was fun. Really appreciate the time. Looking forward to doing it again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Brett.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Stacking Slabs YouTube channel. If you like the collector conversations we're having here, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn the alerts on, check out Stacking Slabs wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want more exclusive content from Stacking Slabs, make sure you join that Patreon group. Thank you and take care.